Hello, everybody. Thank you again for joining me today on Robbie South Teaches How Money Works, the podcast where you learn how money works. Today, we have a very special guest on our show, Miss Kim Schuler. She is a great resource, excellent person, and we want to thank her for being on the show today. She's going to talk to us a little bit today about domestic violence and financial abuse. And kind of give us some tips on that and how that can um, how it hurts people and how ways we could possibly overcome that. So, Kim, if you would just go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself and a little bit of background, if you don't mind.
Sure, Robbie, and thank you so much for having me on your program today. It's wonderful to be here. As you know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so it's a really important time for me and many women leaders to make sure folks are aware of the impact that domestic violence and financial abuse has in our communities and how we can help that. Now, how I got started with this, I'm actually a lawyer by background. I've been a lawyer for more than 30 years and ended up working as in-house counsel for one of the largest financial services companies in the world. My last 4 years working there in-house, I served as the president of their largest broker-dealer in the United States. And what was so interesting, or became so interesting to me, is when I looked up from my work, and many women who are listening to this and are workers, we just put our heads down and we get the work done. We don't spend a lot of time distracted or looking up. But when I looked up from my desk, I noticed that I was like the only woman in the room. And so it really spoke to me that, women need to know more. We need to know how money works. We need to really consider becoming more involved in the financial services industry, as well as the financial decisions for our own family. So I left the corporate side, started my own law firm and my own financial business. And part of that is the outreach that we do to women. And since 25%, 1 in 4 women, will be affected by domestic violence, and the majority of those women are also affected by financial abuse. If we're truly going to reach out to women, we've got to speak about this topic.
Oh, absolutely. And while you gave those numbers for women, not only does it affect women, and of course it affects them more, it does affect men as well. So it's very important to get this message out. And I'm grateful that you have got this going because it's unbearable, painful that people keep re-entering these situations and causing more pain on themselves. So in becoming involved in their finances, how can they really and truly get out of these situations and move forward?
Well, when you think about it, every aspect of leaving an abusive situation involves money, from putting gas in the car or buying a bus ticket or a plane ticket, to getting a new place to live, to putting food on the table, especially if you have children. Most victims report that they stay or go back to abusive situations because they are completely financially dependent on their abuser. So for us, it all starts with financial education and knowing how money works, understanding basic financial concepts that aren't taught in schools, and then showing women how following the 7 money milestones, that checklist for making sure that you've got your financial plan in order, understanding how that works and how it affects you. Women can start, uh, you know, getting, the financial resources and understanding what they need to do to get out of those situations. Now, oftentimes it's, women leave these situations with the clothes on their back. And because of resources in their family or their community, they're able to escape these situations. So sometimes they're not able to apply this financial knowledge until they get out of those situations. But it's okay. Start with the knowledge piece. Whether you can put it into effect then or after you escape that situation, after you survive that situation. That it doesn't matter as long as you start with the knowledge.
That's very good information. And one of the questions that I have, and I'm sure some of the others will as well, where I have lived in my life is more of a more rural area, lower income area. And some of the people there don't always have a job or a job sufficient enough to be able to support themselves or their children if they leave this situation. So if they, let's say they don't have a job to bring in any kind of money, and their spouse or significant other, or the other person in the relationship has total control of the money, how could they really take control of their situation to help better it for them?
In those kinds of situations, family, friends, and community resources become even more important because if the victim isn't able to, earn money or save money in order to escape on their own, relying on those so important resources to just get them out of that situation, and then they can start putting that information into practice, finding work or starting a business, whatever it is. Now, if you're in a rural area and you can't get a job or go to a job, maybe it's an online business that you can start. There are, a lot of things, especially during the pandemic, that people became much more accustomed to doing online than actually going into a physical location or meeting with somebody in person. So get your imaginations working if it's possible to do that in terms of starting an online business or service.
That's very good tips, and it's about opening up the mind and seeing what's available and looking and seeing what's out there. But very good information there. And speaking of opening the minds, you know, people always say there's red flags in different situations, whether it be a person in a bad relationship, whether they're depressed. There's signs that are available that sometimes just get overlooked. What have
Right.
you seen and learned about some of the red flags for this that we can become aware of to help people get out of these situations?
So there are different kinds of financial abuse that we see. One kind is called financial control. And so ask yourself this: does your partner deny or limit your access to money? Or maybe your partner denies you access to information or hides money from you. Maybe your partner demands a detailed accounting of how you spend money, or maybe criticizes your financial decisions. Maybe they threaten to withhold money from you, and oftentimes they'll make financial decisions without consulting or considering you at all. Now, another type of financial abuse is referred to as employment or education sabotage. Does this sound familiar to you? Your partner pressures you to miss or be late for, or maybe quit your job or your academic pursuits. Maybe he harasses you at work or school, or maybe he harasses your coworkers, your bosses, or your school friends. Does he belittle your work or school accomplishments or criticize your career or academic choices? Maybe, he even goes to the extreme length of physically harming you to prevent you from going to work or school. And then the third kind of financial abuse we see is a lingering kind of financial abuse. Even after you get out of an abusive situation, you may still be subject to this. It's called economic exploitation. Does your partner withdraw money from your bank accounts without you knowing? Maybe your partner adds his name to your credit cards, pays the mortgage, the rent, or the bills late on purpose, or maybe doesn't pay them at all. Maybe he runs up a lot of debt in your name or takes out a first or second mortgage on your home. Maybe he absolutely ruins your credit score by these actions. And that's the kind of financial abuse that will follow women years after they're able to escape an abusive situation. But there's hope. There's absolutely hope in knowledge and implementing step by step, little step by little step. We can help you rebuild your finances and help you repair your credit score.
Oh, and absolutely. I mean, the credit score is like everything. I mean, that affects all aspects of your life, from loans to jobs to everything in between. So it's very important, like you said, to make sure that that's corrected as quickly as possible. Now, one of the situations that I have heard about, and I don't know if you have or not, but it's very similar to what you mentioned. I know a person who was the breadwinner of the home. They worked two full-time jobs. The spouse was a stay-at-home spouse. They did the work. They didn't just sit at home doing nothing. But the other person was the primary breadwinner, and the checks from the primary breadwinner went into an account where that individual had no access to the money. They was given an allowance of $100 a week for groceries and gas to get back and forth to work. And when that money was allotted to that individual, if that money was not spent the way the other spouse wanted it spent, there was arguments, fights, complaints. So that
Right,
there again, that's some red flags that you just mentioned. Even though the primary breadwinner was bringing in the money, it was still
right.
an abusive situation because they had no access to it. Is that correct?
It is. It's a great example of financial control, that abusive spouse wanting to control through finances the conduct, the freedom of the breadwinning spouse. And what's so interesting about the financial control type of abuse is that it starts off quite insidious. It starts off with your partner wanting to pay your bills or wanting to make sure you've got enough money to take care of lunch or to do these things that you want to do. And you think, well, isn't that nice? I mean, here's somebody who wants to take care of me. So it all starts under the umbrella of, I want to take care of you, not the true meaning of it, which is, I want to control you. And sometimes it's too late. You've given up all your autonomy financially to this person before you know it. So when I go through the red flags like we just did, it's interesting because the audience will say, oh my gosh, I never thought about that. Oh my goodness, I was a victim, in my current relationship or in a past relationship. Or, oh my goodness, my best friend or my sister is in a relationship that you just described. So it's not that I love going through the red flags, but I really love helping people become more aware, especially when they're in the early stages.
Exactly. Excuse me. And that goes into the next thing of, talking about the problem. You may not realize that there's a problem until you hear somebody talk about it. You see some literature on it and actually see, oh man, I am, like you said, I am going through that, or I know somebody going through that. So bringing that to the front is critically important. So what are some of the things that we can do to help people talk about this problem and get it in front of people?
Well, a lot of women are embarrassed to discuss something like this in the open, what even, with close family members or close friends. And I just want to impress upon them that this is not your fault. You did not bring this on yourself, but you can take control of the situation. In addition to getting that financial knowledge, you need to talk to people. You need to bring this out in the open and you need to get past being embarrassed or ashamed that you find yourself, even as a breadwinner, that you find yourself in this situation in your family. Because a lot of women, 1 in 4 reported, we suspect that it's much more than 1 in 4 because of the underreporting, because women don't talk about it. Start talking about it, and you will find friends, you will find resources, you will find support to help you get out of the situation because sometimes it's too hard to get out by yourself. And when you've got the support of your family and friends, coworkers, local agencies, first responders, whoever it is, that is the difference between life and death for you. The other thing I'll say is, as a financial professional, and for those financial professionals who are listening, when you're working with a couple, whether it's a married couple or just a couple and their finances, make sure you include both partners in the couple in your financial discussion. Even if one of them is going to be more dominant, even if there's absolutely no abuse involved, you want to make sure that both partners are asking questions. Both partners understand what's happening with the money. Both partners' financial goals are being addressed by the financial professional. And so, as a financial professional, that would be my recommendation. Make sure you just talk to both people.
That's very good information. And then one of the common things that I'm seeing as we progress is it's a mindset thing to a certain extent, opening up the mind, seeing what's happening, learning how things work, learning how money works, learning how to get out of a situation. So it can be a total mind shift from what you've been in the past to what you're going to be in the future. And from what I have learned in my life over the past year or so with my different experiences is you go where your mind is. So if you're looking forward and looking to a better place, that's where you're going to end up. So
Right.
I think that's a very important thing, and it's not necessarily an easy thing, but it has to happen for you to overcome some of the challenges that we see. As
Well,
you
oh,
go ahead.
I would just add to that. I mean, that's so important for a lot of women in this situation. A lot of women are mothers in this situation. And for mothers, we put our children first. And
Yes.
you may think that you're staying in this relationship because you're putting your children first. But I got to tell you, the long term effects on a child who witnesses abusive situations, unhealthy relationships, is not good. Even if it's incredibly painful and difficult to get out of that relationship, even if you are going to live in poverty dependent situations for a year or two after you leave, it's better to set that example for your child because your mindset is the best interest of my child. And it's counterintuitive to think changing their whole world is probably better for them. But in the long run, it is.
Well, I agree 100%. I've been in public safety for many, many years as a firefighter, EMT, different things like that. And I've seen where, we get called out to these domestic disturbances and, you know, people just did not want to open up for whatever reasons they have. We'd go out there multiple times to the same people and, we would talk to them, hey, you got to change the situation before it's going to get better. So changing that mindset, looking out for the best interest of the child, what is going to affect them in the long run. I totally agree with you. So once they've started doing some of this and they've started learning how money works, what are some of the things they can apply to move forward to do better? Do you have recommendations on that?
So before you leave a situation like this, unless it's life and death and you just have to get out instantly, I recommend doing some planning. Now, we call it their cash stash. Start hiding some money away. Maybe you have money, leave money with a friend, or you leave it in a location that your partner is not going to find. If you can start a bank account without their knowledge, make sure you don't have any statements that are mailed, nothing comes to your address, that it's all electronic, or maybe you use a friend or family member's address as the address for that account. Open up a credit card in your name that your partner doesn't know about. And again, make sure nothing, no notices, nothing comes to your home address to tip your abuser off. Next, with your smartphone, start taking pictures. Take pictures of 401k statements, investment account statements, bank statements, large assets in the home, vehicles, If you can't take physical possession of birth certificates, marriage licenses, driver's licenses, passports, then take pictures with your phone. Because in addition to wanting to have your cash stash, a bank account, and a credit card that you're going to be able to use, you're going to need those legal documents. And if for whatever reason you can't physically hold them, then you're going to want pictures of them to use when you're able to leave. So that's what I usually recommend to people.
And that's some stuff that I hadn't even thought about. And I've been through a divorce myself, and I didn't do some of the things that you just mentioned. And that would have been very helpful for me to have known in my situation, doing that because, birth certificate, social security card, things like that, I could not get. And I had to go
Right.
through the processes of getting that, and it took a lot more time, a headache, come very close to losing my job because I had just changed jobs and I hadn't got my social security card yet, and it
Oh,
was a
yeah.
nightmare. So I understand personally where that can be a value to get those things and in there quickly. So that also kind of ties in where you're talking about getting a credit card and a bank statement to getting a personal safety plan in place. And also from what I see, by getting those things in early, as you mentioned earlier, you can start affecting your credit score and making sure it doesn't dip down too far. Is that kind of where you're going with that in part, having that plan in place, knowing you're going to have
Right.
security and that kind of stuff?
It is, starting to establish credit on your own. And to the extent you're able to remove yourself from existing credit cards that you and your partner are on, or other debts that you and your partner that he has amassed, in your name, to the extent you can separate yourself from that, you need to start taking those steps. I understand if you can't unwind all of that until you're going through the official divorce process. But if you can save your credit score, but or be taking these steps to save or repair your credit score before you leave the situation, you're going to be much better off when you're trying to, rent an apartment or buy a house or, get a car.
Exactly. And, something that I personally here again have went through is know your tax situation and know have access to those returns, whether it be online or in paper, because that can be a nightmare in going through that as well. Now, one more question that just popped into my mind. Let's say that you and your spouse have a home together. And during the divorce, you do one spouse that actually owns the property does a quick claim to the other spouse to get the property. However, there's still a loan under the other spouse's, the main breadwinner's name, and the other spouse that now has a quick claim will not refinance, will not sell the house to get that loan done away with. And this has been multiple years. How do you recommend approaching that situation? Or is there anything that can be done?
Well, that's usually something that you need to force during the divorce. You need to force them to refinance or force them to take the steps to take you off of the mortgage in exchange for the quitclaim deed. Afterwards, it's much more difficult. You've got to take them back to court and try and force them to get this done. There's more incentive during the divorce process because the court is looking at it, you know, to get it done then. It's not impossible to have things done after the divorce, but it's it's all difficult, but it's less difficult during the divorce process.
Right. And there again, like you said, going back to court, that's gonna cost you more money, time away
Yeah,
from work. So it is much better to go ahead and get that handled at the forefront. Um, so those are just some of the things that I've really encountered personally. You've even opened up my eyes to some very valuable information here today. Um, if someone would like to come out and have this class, is there a specific way they need to reach out to get this class done for them, or how would you recommend that?
absolutely. Well, first of all, Robbie, they can always get in touch with you, and you can reach out to me or some of the other women leaders we work with to help put the class on. But if you want to email me directly, my email address is kim.schooler, kim.schouller @wealthwave.com, wealthwave.com.
Well, thank you very much. And we do want to get this message out. So if any of you out there that are listening that would want this class, we can do it virtual, we can do in person, whatever meets your needs. We just want to make sure that this information gets out there to the people that can use it. If you want to reach out to me, robbiesouth.com is the easiest way. Got my email there, phone number. Feel free to reach out to either one of us. I want to thank you again, Kim, for coming on the show today. And we look forward to moving forward in this process and getting everyone educated.
Great. And Robbie, just one more thing I wanted to mention. If you're listening to this program and you are a victim or you know someone who's a victim, they can get some great information at www.domesticshelters.org. That will identify what resources are available in your area, or you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help. Don't stay in a bad situation just because you don't feel like there's resources out there to help you out of it. There are resources, and people want you to be better and succeed. Anything else, Kim?
That's it, Robbie. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Thank all of y'all for listening. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.